Jika kita ingin merancang pintu air yang ada pada bendungan atau dam, maka kita perlu memperhitungkan gaya-gaya yang bekerja pada pintu air itu. Gaya yang bekerja akan berasal dari tekanan air di mana pintu air itu berada. Ya, ingat ada prinsip hidrostatika, benda akan mengalami tekanan di kedalaman tertentu ya berdasarkan prinsip dP per dz sama dengan minus gamma. Ya, jadi setiap benda yang ada di kedalaman tertentu akan mendapatkan tekanan sebesar dP per dz sama dengan min gamma. Nah, prinsip itu digunakan untuk mencari gaya yang bekerja pada suatu benda di kedalaman tertentu. Di kuliah sebelumnya atau di materi sebelumnya, Anda sudah tahu bagaimana menghitung tekanan. Berikutnya, Anda harus bisa mencari berapa besarnya gaya pada benda yang ada di kedalaman tertentu itu. Kita akan membahas hal itu di materi hari ini. Jadi, gaya hidrostatika yang kita perhitungkan itu merupakan atau berasal dari tekanan yang bekerja di kedalaman tertentu tadi. Pada kuliah yang lalu, kita sudah membahas tentang gaya hidrostatika. Ingat, gaya hidrostatika adalah gaya yang terjadi pada benda yang berada di kedalaman suatu cairan yang nilainya bisa kita perhitungkan sebagai gamma dikali dengan kedalaman. Gamma adalah berat jenis dari cairan atau berat jenis dari fluida. Pada kali ini, kita akan membahas tentang gaya hidrostatika pada bidang permukaan. Jika terdapat sebuah permukaan yang terendam dalam cairan, maka gaya akan bekerja pada bidang itu. Perhatikan gambar A. Sebuah tangki berisi cairan dengan berat jenis gamma. Kita bisa lihat bahwa pada dasar tangki terdapat tekanan yang besarnya gamma dikali H. Sekali lagi, ingat bahwa gamma adalah berat jenis cairan dan H adalah kedalaman yang diukur dari permukaan. Akibat adanya tekanan yang bekerja pada suatu luas penampang, maka muncul gaya. Nah, gaya pada dasar tangki atau Fr ini adalah sama dengan tekanan dibagi dengan luas. Sekarang perhatikan gambar B. Kita lihat pada bidang vertikal, gaya bekerja bervariasi sesuai dengan tekanan yang juga bervariasi menurut kedalamannya. Di permukaan cairan, pada bidang itu bekerja gaya atau bekerja tekanan sama dengan 0. Sedangkan makin dalam, pada lokasi H, misalnya di dasar tangki, tekanan yang bekerja pada bidang vertikal adalah gamma dikali H. Distribusi tekanan dari permukaan hingga kedalaman, kita lihat bervariasi secara linier dari 0 hingga gamma dikali H. 0 di permukaan, gamma dikali H di dasar tangki. Dengan kondisi seperti ini, berapa gaya yang bekerja pada bidang vertikal itu? Kita akan lihat pada slide berikutnya. Bagaimana jika bidang permukaan tidak dalam posisi vertikal atau tegak, atau juga tidak berada dalam posisi horizontal? Bidang tersebut berada dalam posisi miring, seperti yang kita lihat pada gambar sebelah kiri. Benda yang miring terendam di dalam sebuah cairan, maka bisa dipastikan bahwa gaya hidrostatik bekerja pada bidang miring itu. Kita lihat posisi atau lokasi bidang miring berada di kedalaman H. Kemudian pada bidang permukaan kita lihat ada titik-titik C dan titik CP yang menandakan titik C adalah titik pusat dari benda, dari bidang. Kemudian CP adalah titik pusat dari tekanan. Jadi dalam hal ini, antara titik berat C dengan titik pusat tekanan memiliki lokasi yang berbeda. Gaya resultan atau FR bekerja pada titik pusat tekanan atau CP. Sekarang persoalannya adalah jika bidang yang miring itu berada di kedalaman dari permukaan fluida, berapakah gaya resultan yang terjadi atau gaya resultan yang menekan permukaan benda itu? Kita lihat ada formulasi. Gaya resultan adalah gamma dikali A dikali YC dikali sinus theta. Atau dengan penyederhanaan, kita bisa melihat gaya resultan atau FR adalah gamma dikali HC dikali A. Gamma itu sendiri adalah berat jenis dari cairan. HC, jika kita lihat di gambar sebelah kiri, adalah jarak vertikal yang diukur dari permukaan cairan atau dari free surface ke lokasi titik berat benda. Kemudian A atau luas itu menyatakan luas permukaan dari benda yang sedang kita amati. Selanjutnya, ada persamaan lain yang juga digunakan untuk mengukur jarak, misalnya YR atau YC, yang jarak itu diukur miring, bukan diukur tegak, seperti jarak H. Kita lihat ada formulasi YR dikurangi YC sama dengan IXC dibagi YC kali A. IXC adalah momen inersia penampang, yang besarnya tergantung pada bentuk penampang. Kita lihat pada gambar 11-12, ada dua jenis penampang, yaitu persegi dan lingkaran. Masing-masing memiliki momen inersia penampang berbeda.
In this lesson, we'll derive the equation for calculating the magnitude of the hydrostatic force on a plane surface. Here we have a rectangular fish tank filled with water to a depth d. In order to determine whether the fish tank walls can support that much water without breaking, we would need to know the total force exerted on the walls. First, we will determine the resultant force along the bottom wall. The tank is surrounded on all sides by the atmosphere, which has a pressure Pa. On the underside of the bottom wall, which is exposed to the atmosphere, the pressure force is Pa times the area of the bottom wall, and this force points upward. Inside the tank, the pressure force increases as one descends through the water, reaching a maximum at the bottom of the tank. The absolute pressure at depth d is the atmospheric pressure plus the specific weight of the water times the depth. This creates a downward force on the wall equal to Pa plus gamma d times the area of the bottom wall. If we examine just the fluid pressure forces acting along the bottom wall, the resultant force is Pa times the area of the bottom wall minus the quantity Pa plus gamma d times the area of the bottom wall. The atmospheric pressure terms cancel out, and we are left with negative gamma times d times the area. This means that the resultant force points downward with a magnitude of gamma times d times the area. Finding the resultant pressure force along the bottom wall was relatively easy because the pressure is constant along the entire wall. This is not the case for the side walls. The pressure along the exterior of the side walls is Pa, and the related pressure force is Pa times the area of the side wall. However, on the interior of the side walls, the pressure increases linearly with depth. At a depth h, the pressure is the atmospheric pressure plus gamma h. We want to determine the magnitude of the resultant force caused by the fluid pressure on the side walls. Here is a different tank. This tank is open to the atmosphere and partially filled with a liquid of specific weight gamma. We are going to examine a section of the flat wall that's highlighted in pink, which has an arbitrary shape and which is oriented at an arbitrary angle theta relative to the free surface. We set up a coordinate system where the x-coordinate comes out of the screen and is oriented along the free surface. The y-coordinate is oriented along the section of wall we wish to examine. We will need to examine some important points on the wall, so we rotate the surface 90 degrees about the y-axis to get a better view. Point xy is the location of some arbitrary small area dA on the wall. dA is the area dx times dy and is at a depth h from the free surface. Point C is the centroid of the wall and is located at coordinates xc, yc. The depth of the centroid from the free surface is hc. The centroid is the geometric center of the wall, and the centroid and center of mass are the same if the density of the wall is constant. Point CP is the center of pressure, which is where the resultant force Fr acts. The coordinates of the center of pressure are labeled as xr, yr. The resultant force and center of pressure location produce an equivalent force and moment on the wall as the original fluid pressure field. In order to find the resultant force over the entire highlighted surface, we will start by examining the force at the location of dA. The small pressure force on the exterior of the wall at area dA, labeled dFx, is the atmospheric pressure Pa times the area dA. The small pressure force on the interior of the wall at area dA, which is labeled dF in, is the fluid pressure at dA times the area dA. The pressure at that depth is the atmospheric pressure plus gamma h. Using trigonometry, h can be rewritten as y times sine theta. The net force due to fluid pressure at dA is dF interior minus dF exterior. After plugging in the expressions for the two forces and eliminating PA times dA, we obtain gamma times y sine theta times dA. To find the resultant force caused by fluid pressure on the entire wall, we integrate dF net along all points of the wall. We plug in the expression for dF net and pull gamma sine theta out of the integral because they are constant. The integral of y dA can be simplified if we recall the definition of a centroid. The y-coordinate of the centroid, yc, is the integral of y dA integrated over the entire surface divided by the entire surface area A. We now have an expression for the resultant force Fr. Fr is equal to gamma times sine theta times yc times the area. Yc times sine theta is equal to the depth of the centroid, hc, so we can rewrite the resultant force equation as gamma times hc times A. This form of the equation is often more convenient to use when solving fluid mechanics problems. Gamma hc is the pressure at the centroid, Pc, so we can further rewrite the resultant force equation as the pressure at the centroid Pc times the area A. These equations are valid for any flat surface in which the free surface of the liquid and the side of the tank are both exposed to the same pressure. In this case, they're both exposed to the atmospheric pressure. We are free to use either yc or hc to find the resultant force, and it's important to understand the difference between the two quantities. hc is the vertical distance from the free surface to the centroid, and yc is the distance from the free surface to the centroid as measured along the orientation of the wall. If the wall is oriented at an angle less than 90 degrees relative to the free surface, hc will be shorter than yc. If the wall is vertical and theta is 90 degrees, hc and yc will be the same distance, and in both cases the distance yr will be greater than yc. Although not proven in this video, if the tank is pressurized to a gauge pressure of P0, the equation for the resultant force would need to be modified to gamma sine theta yc plus P0 times the area A, which can be rewritten as gamma hc plus P0 times A.
Materi berikutnya yang berkaitan dengan statika fluida adalah buoyancy. Kita mengenalnya dengan gaya apung. Coba perhatikan ilustrasi pada slide ini. Jika ada sebuah benda berada di dalam sebuah cairan, karena berat dan karena gaya angkat yang dimiliki oleh benda itu, maka benda berada dalam kondisi terapung. Berat benda kita perhitungkan sebagai W sama dengan mg, sedangkan gaya apung atau buoyant force, dalam hal ini disimbolkan dengan Fb, adalah hasil perkalian gamma dikali dengan V. Sekali lagi, diingatkan bahwa gamma adalah berat jenis dari cairan, sedangkan V adalah volume dari benda yang tercelup ke dalam cairan. Jadi ingat, V itu adalah bukan volume benda keseluruhan, melainkan volume dari benda yang tercelup ke dalam fluida. Jika kita ingat prinsip dari hukum Archimedes, maka volume benda yang tercelup itu sama dengan volume cairan yang dipindahkan. Jadi kita bisa menghitung berapa besarnya volume benda yang tercelup atau volume dari cairan yang dipindahkan, baru kemudian dikalikan dengan berat jenis cairan, maka kita akan mendapatkan besaran dari gaya apung atau FB. Benda yang berada dalam kondisi diam, yang terapung ataupun yang berada di permukaan, ataupun sedang melayang di dalam cairan, maka benda saat itu kita katakan sedang dalam kondisi seimbang. Dalam kondisi itu, gaya berat W sama besarnya dengan gaya apung FB. Dengan demikian, kita bisa perhitungkan apabila kita ingin mencari berapa massa dari benda pada saat terendam di dalam cairan, maka prinsip-prinsip yang ada pada materi ini bisa kita aplikasikan.
Welcome to iLectureOnline. In this video, as well as the ones to come afterwards, we're going to talk about the buoyancy force. Now, we've mentioned the buoyancy force before in some of our videos, but we're going to do a special series on some of the special cases that we may encounter. For example, if we have an object that actually is floating, doesn't sink to the bottom, and we want to figure out what percentage or what fraction of the object will be below the surface and what fraction will be above the surface, we have some special techniques in order to figure out how to do that. And so in this case, since we're looking for what is x equal to, x being the fraction of the object being submerged below the surface, how will we go about figuring that out? Well, first of all, we need to understand that if the density of an object is less than the density of the liquid, then the object will float. Like ice, wood typically will float in the water with a small portion of it above the surface and some portion below the surface. We still keep the same definition to figure out how to do this by saying the buoyancy force, and I'll write the buoyancy force as BF, makes it easier than to write it out like that. The buoyancy force is equal by definition to the weight of the displaced liquid. So in this case, the displaced liquid is probably water, but we can simply generalize it by saying the displaced liquid. And of course, we can also write the weight as being the mass times acceleration due to gravity. And since we have the definition of the density being equal to the mass divided by the volume, we could also write the mass as simply being the product of the density times the volume. So this can be written as the density times the volume times g, where the density is going to be the density of the liquid, and the volume is going to be equal to the portion that is submerged below the liquid, so portion submerged. What that means now is that we're going to have a force pushing up. I'm looking for a different color here. So we're going to have a force pushing up against the object. This is going to be the buoyancy force. And then we're going to have the weight of the object pushing down, or at least pushing the object into the liquid. And when the two equalize, that's when the object will stop going down. If the buoyancy is greater, then the object will go up. If the mg is greater, the object will go down, and eventually it will find its equilibrium point. At that point, the object will be floating. We can also say, because of this, that the buoyancy force is equal to the weight of the object. So in this case, when an object floats, and of course we can only say this when the object is floating, because if the object doesn't float and it sinks to the bottom, the buoyancy force is going to be less than the weight of the object. But in the case that the object is floating, we can also say that the buoyancy force is equal to the weight of the object, which is equal to m times g. And of course, we can do the same thing as we did for the liquid. The mass can be written as the density times the volume times g, where in this case, this here is going to be the density of the object, as opposed to over here where this is the density of the liquid, and the volume is going to be the volume of the object. Now what we can do is set those two equal to one another. Now we have to be careful that we use the right subscript so we can keep them separate. So we can say that the buoyancy force, which is equal to the weight of the displaced liquid, and maybe I'll write it like this: the weight of the displaced liquid is equal to the weight of the object. And the weight of the displaced liquid can be written as this: the density of the liquid, and I'll go density sub L for liquid, times the volume of the displaced liquid. So again, I'll say volume sub L, that means the volume of the displaced liquid, the portion of the object that's submerged, times G is equal to the weight of the object, which can be written as the density of the object, times the volume of the object, times G. And that's how we can keep the two separate. Right away, we realize that G can be canceled out on both sides of the equation. And then I can substitute for each of these volumes what those volumes are equal to. The volume of the displaced liquid is this region right here, assuming that the cross-sectional area as looking from the top is L by L, so that would be a square object to make things easier. We can say this is the density of the liquid times L squared times X. X would be the portion in the vertical direction that is below the surface. H being the total height or thickness of the object, Y being the portion being above the surface or above the liquid. And this is equal to the density of the object times the volume of the object. In this case, that would be L squared H. And of course, we already canceled out the G's. Now we can see that on both sides of the equation, I can cancel out an L squared. And then if I want to solve this for X, I can say that X is equal to the height or the thickness of the object times the ratio of the density of the object divided by the density of the liquid. And let's put a box around that so you can see that. So that's how we find the portion that is submerged. It is simply the height or the thickness of the object times the ratio of the density of the object divided by the density of the liquid. Remember that when it floats, this is smaller than this, so this fraction is less than 1, and so X is only a fraction of H, a fraction that's smaller than 1. We can also write it as a ratio. We can also say that the ratio of X to H is equal to the ratio of the density of the object divided by the density of the liquid. And so that's another good way of expressing how much of the object will be below the surface as compared to the whole thickness of the object. And that's how we calculate the portion of an object that's submerged below the surface if the density of the object is less than the density of the liquid. And that's how it's done.